they have physical abuse, sexual abuse, whatever it is, there is nothing that is insignificant, and people can always reach out. The reason that we emphasize this is because many times I think we get the response from survivors saying, I was never hit, so I'm not a victim or survivor, or, just thinking that that is the only way that you can get supports or get resources. So the reason we really try to emphasize the different types and methods of control are for those reasons, to make sure that people understand there are so many different types and ways that intimate partner violence can be perpetrated. Does anyone here, you can unmute or you can just throw it in the chat, do you guys currently screen for intimate partner violence in the roles that you have? And do you happen to include a set of questions that include things like this, like the different types? You can throw it in the chat and I'll check on that. But I think I get a lot of questions when I do these type of trainings on, like, why do I have to ask so many questions about intimate partner violence? And this is really that reason, is because it is not one size fits all. So many times we'll see people saying, I've been, kind of emotionally abused and I get all my money taken, but I've never been hit, so I'm not a victim. So the reason we emphasize these different types of abuse is for that reason. So first and foremost, I always emphasize emotional and psychological abuse. So this can be when someone's being intimidated, humiliated, especially young adults. We see a lot of extreme jealousy or that possessiveness, like, you need to check into me or text me right away, like all these things. Threatening acts of violence, criticizing, belittling someone. You can only be told so long that you're fat, you're ugly, or this is your fault. I wouldn't have had to do this if you didn't do that, before people start to think that that is, who they are, or, that it is their fault for that abuse. So what we try to emphasize is when we talk about emotional or psychological abuse is it's kind of like walking on eggshells all the time. So you're thinking, what is this individual going to do to me, my kids, my pets, or things that I find important if I make this decision? So that constant walking on eggshells, trying to adhere to what that violence might happen in that home, we see leading to these secondary health concerns. So a lot of times I think we think someone's just going to walk in with these glaring instances of physical abuse, but most likely you're going to see more of those secondary health concerns. So those flare-ups and certain health concerns around the times when abuse is worse. So if someone's like living in that fight or flight mode all the time, so having different things that will keep affecting their health, their child's health around the time of that abuse. So emotional abuse, I think, pretty much overarches all forms, knowing that someone is using that as a way to control. And then we have physical abuse. So these are the obvious ones that people usually think of when we think of domestic violence. So I do emphasize that many times you will not see these glaring instances of physical abuse, because many times those will be the days that they might cancel appointments with you or wear excessive clothing, sunglasses, whatever it is to help hide those particular things. But obviously making sure that we are asking if we do see anything and seeing if those stories are lining up with the way in which that injury is presenting, to see if we can help individuals with that. Sexual abuse is obviously another form of intimate partner violence. I think this kind of gets swept under sometimes because we think, if someone's in a relationship with someone, how can they be sexually abused? But it's important to understand that many times we do have individuals who are in relationships but still have that instance of being abused in a way that they're forced to do sexual acts that they're not comfortable with, or they're filmed or taken pictures of. They can use as blackmail. We see individuals saying, if you love me, we don't have to wear a condom, then unfortunately leading to, STIs, things like that. So important to understand that although this person may be in a relationship with someone, there still can be instances of sexual abuse. Next, we have technological abuse. We pretty much say that technological abuse it accompanies every form of abuse at this point in time, because we all probably have our phones in our hands right now, or we're on our computers. We all have all sorts of different technological things. Great in the sense of helping us with a lot of day-to-day tasks, but in the sense of abuse, we sometimes obviously see individuals using that in a negative way. So being able to track location, demanding check-ins, putting spyware on people's phones, using children if they're in a divorce by giving them new cell phones, iPads, but has different tracking devices on them. And in the sense of anyone who does documentation electronically for an individual, whether it be in the healthcare system or mental health or any community services, is many times individuals will share a password with individuals. So if that information is going home to a medical portal or something like that, we really need to ensure that we're asking, who has access to that, and making people understand, like, if you don't own your cell phone plan, that person can still see where you're at and how, you're utilizing those things. Finally, we have financial abuse, which again goes into the realm of technological abuse, because we do see people who are able to track. If they share credit cards, they can see exactly where they're spending, when they're spending. Many people get their wages taken by their abuser, so they don't have that ability to just go out and get a new apartment and go out and buy the things that they might need that are being withheld from them. We have others who've been had their credit totally run out of control by an abuser. So when they think about housing, like Jasmine will talk about later, like, I have terrible credit. How am I supposed to go and do these things by myself? Or that individual might hold the insurance plan for the family. So there's a lot that goes into intimate partner violence, and we try to emphasize this lengthy description of what it actually is, just to make everyone understand that we might think we can understand and help these individuals with what we think is best, but at the end of the day, the victims and survivors that are dealing with these individuals every day know their violence best. So it's really important to understand that we need to listen to them to help better understand what's going on in all the different ways that they might be controlled, and to be able to help them once we're able to, listen to what they have to say. So next slide. So we get the question a lot, why does someone stay in an abusive relationship if this is the way that the relationship is? So we hope that question will be completely wiped out of your brain by the end of this training, because we don't want to punish people who are being abused by asking, why don't you leave? We need to ask, how can we help support you, and understand that if someone could just pack up and leave, they would. I'm sure all of you today don't necessarily have all of your things that you would need right this second to leave an abusive relationship. If I asked you to leave right this second, do you have your passports, your medications, your children, everything you would need to not have to re-enter the home that you most likely share with that abuser? So really important, again, that we're listening to survivors. They know their violence best. And then understanding that everyone's violence is different. So one example might be totally different than the way someone else has experienced it. So just a few of the challenges that we see behind the scenes are, number one, that fear of being hurt or killed. We do unfortunately know that when someone is in the act of leaving an abusive relationship, that is when people have the highest rate of fatality. So we really want to ensure that we are understanding that our decision to help someone leave that second may not be the safest decision. And that's why we really want to connect people to a certified advocate to ensure that they can make that safety plan. We also know that people love these individuals. This was someone that was at some point their soulmate. We want to see the best in people. We're all human. And the thing with domestic violence and intimate partner violence is that they have the ability to speak back. So when we might say, no, we're done, I'm leaving, that person can apologize and, they'll never do it again. I was just having a bad day. And, we want to see the best in that person and think, okay, well, they're right. Maybe, if I had just done that differently, they wouldn't have had to do that, or they were just not feeling good that day. So we do see that people return to abusive relationships 5 to 7 times before actually leaving those abusive relationships. We know obviously people share children, want to keep in that family dynamic. Money can be a concern. Abusers promise to change. And sometimes at this point in time, it might just be safer to stay. It feels weird to say that, but again, we have to listen to these survivors and make sure that we're creating a safety plan that can be effective and helpful in the sense that every box is checked before they actually make that move. And we obviously know that there's a lot of trauma that goes in with any form of abuse. So it affects the way that victims approach potentially helpful relationships, compounding issues of isolation. A huge thing with intimate partner violence is that feeling of isolation. Abusers are really good at being able to separate people from their normal family, their friends, the activities they like, or even moving them to areas where they just don't have those natural supports or know where to turn. So I think the best thing that you guys, anyone on this call, can do is to remember that although we can't necessarily change the abuse that person is giving to the person that you might be serving, what you can do is support them in all the ways we were talking about today, like connecting them to an IPV advocate, helping them pull out of isolation in the ways that you might be best at. So helping them get connected to SNAP or, WIC, any resources that can help connect them to further services. All of these things can help pull people from that isolation and feel as though they can get connected. Next slide. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Devon to talk through our big three, which we hope you guys can remember as you move through what you'll learn today. These are some of our most lethal instances, and we call them the big three S's. So hopefully you can remember those. Thank you guys so much for having me today. If you guys have any questions as you go throughout this or afterwards, or if you need any resources, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and that's coming up, and we are more than happy to do any trainings. We can do just like Q&A sessions if it's helpful to just talk through cases, things like that, and we have tons and tons of resources. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll put my info in the chat, and I'll hand it over to Devon.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Ashley.
Sorry. Thank you, Ashley, so much. Good morning again, everyone. My name is Devon Rayment. I use she, her pronouns. And so I'm going to be doing the next portion of the presentation today. So as Ashley said, these are what we call the three S's. And we sort of promote the idea that if you remember nothing from, this first half of the training about DV 101, as we like to call it, we would really hope that you remember these three S's: the stalking, strangulation, and separation. And we categorize them like this because these are the instances when we see the highest lethality in relationships. As Ashley mentioned, she sits on the MMRC, the Maternal Mortality Review Committee, and seeing these situations in relationships lend themselves to be significantly more dangerous for the victims than others. So obviously, if you see or work with clients who talk to you about any sort of stalking dynamic in their relationship, as Ashley mentioned earlier, the technological abuse, we see forms of that in almost every sort of method of control, as Ashley was saying earlier. The stalking, the needing to know where someone is at all time, the tracking on your phone, the checking people's text messages, the monitoring bank accounts, all of those, we consider stalking behaviors. If you have someone in a relationship who's constantly being monitored, we consider that a stalking dynamic. So again, for situations like that, those situations can turn lethal and very dangerous and very aggressive very quickly. Even if they start out as someone saying, oh, my partner just, likes to check in with me, likes, for me to tell them where I am or what I'm doing. They might find it endearing at the beginning of a relationship for someone to know where they are and those things, but it can take a turn quickly when someone is in a relationship where there is this pattern of controlling behavior. Strangulation is significant in that it's a pretty intimate form of violence and aggressive behavior. And we do see this quite frequently. I sit on the Fatality Review Committee for the state, and so we review all instances of intimate partner violence. And we do see history of strangulation in many of the cases that we review, simply not even as a manner of death, but more so there's a history of someone being strangled in the past. It's extremely aggressive, and as I said, an intimate form of violence, and it demonstrates, an aggressive personality that shows a lot of passion in a negative way. So the last S is separation. We do see a lot of clients whose tactics, their partner's tactics become more severe, more aggressive at the moment. If they say they're going to leave the relationship, partners sort of tend to panic and say, well, I love you, I don't want this relationship to end. And so some of those controlling behaviors, the emotional abuse, the financial abuse, all of those tend to increase during that time. So we do see that time when someone's trying to leave a relationship, whether it's a divorce, whether they're moving out, whether they're just saying, I don't want to be with you anymore. Separation is a highly lethal time in relationships, so that is a component of a lot of the work that our advocates do with the safety planning piece, is really making sure that if someone is ready to leave a relationship, whether they're living with them or not, that they really walk through the safety planning of that and walk through all the scenarios quickly and make sure people are prepared, making sure you have a safe place to go, making sure you're not being monitored. Jasmine's going to talk later about safety planning, so I don't want to get too much into it. But again, these are the 3 S's. So if you can just kind of in the back of your mind, remember any of the clients or individuals that you work with, if you see any of these sort of behaviors, these are the ones that are really big red flags for us. So sort of, with clients that you're working with, what are some of the signs to look for with determining whether or not someone you think is in an unhealthy relationship? So this is not the case for everyone, but these are some of the, again, like the big red flags that we see that a victim or a survivor may exhibit, people that you work with, they might have frequent injuries, with the excuse of, oh, it was an accident, or, I got this bruise, I'm not sure how I got it, or I walked into a door, I don't remember what happened. This is sort of stereotypical behavior that, is people say, oh, well, someone's being hit or physically abused. They might try to hide that or lie about it. But it is true that we do see this behavior in many of our clients who don't want other people to know that someone is putting their hands on them in an unkind way. They might dress in larger clothing or clothing designed to hide bruises or scars, things like that. Many times clients who have been emotionally or psychologically abused for a long time, it really does take a toll on their confidence. As Ashley was saying, this idea of always being unsure of what they're doing, if what they're doing is the right thing or the wrong thing, if it's going to make their partner upset. It really takes a toll on their confidence, this like walking on eggshells mentality. So clients who really, are unable to make decisions on their own or feel like they might be doing something wrong. People who suggest that, they are restricted or not being allowed to see family and friends. Again, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes in the beginning of a relationship, partners who are controlling tend to say, oh, I just want to spend time with you. Maybe you shouldn't go out with your friends tonight. Let's do something just us. Or, they'll try to keep their partner from maybe seeing family members by saying, I'm just not really comfortable around your family, or I don't know if your family likes me. So, maybe we should just, do something you and I, or maybe we should do our own thing. Maybe we should not go to your family's house for the holidays. Maybe we should start our own tradition. At points, some people can find that endearing and loving, knowing that their partner wants to spend that much time with them. But in a relationship where the power and control dynamic is off, this can again sort of spiral into a situation where all of a sudden someone feels like, well, they haven't seen their family in a long time. And their family is starting to say, hey, we haven't seen you since you started dating so-and-so or living with so-and-so, can we see you more? We feel like you never want to see us. Same thing with friends. Friends might say, I haven't seen you in a while. Let's hang out. Let's do this. But then, friends might start to drop off if they feel like you're not giving anything into that relationship or their friendship. So, victims tend to lose friends in that way. And then also, again, people who rarely go out in public without their partner, this can be a sign or a symptom of a very controlling dynamic where their partner doesn't want them to go out, unaccompanied or without them. So, it's important to remember, as Ashley said, at the end of the day, at some point, even in incredibly unhealthy relationships, at some point, both partners consider this relationship healthy and loving. And there are many victims who, even at the height of the abuse, still say that they love this person and that they don't really want their relationship to end. They just want maybe the violence to stop or the controlling behavior to stop, or they want the person to be who they were a year ago or 2 years ago when they first started to be together. So there's always that holding on to hope with victims that, that person might change. They might change their behaviors. They might, start letting me see friends more. They might give me, let me get a job, or all of those things. So it is important to keep that in mind, that victims know their abuser and their violence and their situation best. So as people who work with them, we always have to be very cautious not to project our own personal biases and opinions on others, and just let them sort of lead the way and guide us. So the next section that I want to talk about today is the health impacts of intimate partner violence. This is a large chunk of the work that Ashley and I do, working with community providers, health professionals, people in the community who have some type of impact on mental health and health with victims. So we like to talk about the mental health and the physical health impacts of intimate partner violence. So intimate partner violence can impact an individual's health and even has health consequences for the children who witness abuse. This is really important too, as it's not so much even about the victim. It's also keeping in mind if there's children in the household, this can also impact their mental health and physical health as well. I was speaking with a survivor recently, and she had, 3 young children actually, and she was saying that even though she had separated from her partner a year or 2 ago, and her child is now 5, I believe, so the child was 2 and 3 when the abuse was happening. She, a young child, she was expressing that, her child was exhibiting symptoms of, ACEs, having behavior problems at school, behavior difficulties at home, all of these things, because even though he was a small child when this was going on, he still is significantly impacted by this. So we never want to discount the fact that not only does it affect the mental and physical health of the victims, it can also significantly impact children's mental health and health as well. And women, just in general, with a history of intimate partner violence, have a significantly higher healthcare utilization cost. You can see the statistic right there about the cost of healthcare, and it's just something to keep in mind. Obviously, it's not, of critical importance for us because we want our victims to get the healthcare and the proper care that they need, but it's just, an interesting statistic to look at the actual financial cost of intimate partner violence. And this is one of the last bullet here is one of our favorite things that we talk about, is that abuse is more common for women in the United States than breast cancer and diabetes combined. So we talk about how October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and it's also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And the truth of the matter is that we see much larger campaigns about breast cancer awareness, the wearing of the pink, in the town that I live in, all of the sports teams, the kids' sports teams, they all wear some type of pink to promote breast cancer awareness and do charity fundraising, things like that, which is all wonderful and amazing. But the fact of the matter is that intimate partner violence is more common than breast cancer and diabetes combined. So we really try to push for more awareness of domestic violence and the importance of October. And again, as Ashley mentioned, Purple Thursday, purple is the color for domestic violence. And we're really working hard to imprint on everyone what a significant public health crisis intimate partner violence truly is. So there's obviously physical violence that happens in some relationships, as Ashley was talking about earlier, but Ashley was also saying, we also see a lot of victims who say, I was never hit, my partner never put their hands on me, but they're still technically in an abusive relationship. I'll share with you. So I live down in Fairfield County, and in my town, I was, scrolling on Facebook last night, and there's a couple of groups I belong to in town, and one of them is a working moms group. And so I'm scrolling through, and I start reading this post that someone posted anonymously. And it said, it was from a woman, and she said, I just would really like the hive mentality on this situation that happened to me at home tonight. And she started talking about this scenario. She was at home with her husband and her young child who was potty training. She had her young son sitting on the training potty, and she got up and left the room to go and get the wipes for her child. and she came back and the child had stood up and defecated on the floor. So she was cleaning it up. She got a spray bottle and vinegar and all of these cleaning products, was cleaning up. And then her husband came in and started yelling and screaming at her. And, you know, I can't believe she, you know, you weren't on top of this. You weren't watching him. This is disgusting. Da, 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 da. And he grabbed the cleaning bottle and started spraying her in the face with the cleaning solution. So this is, it was an anonymous post. I have no idea who this person is. But, you know, so she was on here sharing all of this very intimate information. And she said, you know, he's never put his hands on me, but, you know, is this abusive? And there was, as you can imagine, 30 or 40 comments, people saying this is absolutely abusive, this is dangerous, this can escalate quickly. And I was so proud of, you know, all of these other moms in my town, because almost every single one of them, you know, put links for DVCC, which is the agency in our area that handles domestic violence. So, you know, but it was interesting that she sort of wasn't sure if this was really abusive or not. But, you know, everyone who chimed in said, you know, just because he doesn't put his hands on you doesn't mean it's not abusive. This is controlling, this is aggressive. So again, not all of these scenarios people necessarily recognize as controlling or abusive behaviors. So in connection with that is, so it's not necessarily so much we see people in the ER all the time with broken bones and bruises. It's not always that sort of physical abuse that impacts health, but there's also this emotional and psychological abuse that impacts health. So what are some of the common ones that we see with these indirect health conditions that can come up or be exacerbated by someone who is in an unhealthy relationship, who again is walking on eggshells, feels all of these stressors all the time? We see victims who complain about significant abdominal pain, either weight loss or weight gain, a lot of anxiety, as you can imagine. Oftentimes we hear reports of victims who have asthma, who have more frequent asthma attacks because of the stress of the situation, gastro issues, as I was saying, pregnancy challenges. We also see a lot of and STIs, as well as Ashley was saying, people who are in, you know, unhealthy relationships whose partners use sexual tactics to manipulate and control them, sleep issues, and then a large one that we see quite frequently is substance use and misuse and substance use disorders. We see quite frequently with many of our clients. So it's just important to keep in mind with clients that you work with that it's not always the health impacts that you're going to see on someone's exterior. There's all kinds of things going on inside that might not be as relevant. So I just wanted to share a couple of these interesting facts that I think, just again, to keep everyone's mindset that it's not necessarily what's on the outside that's happening. So girls who have been sexually abused are more likely to use or misuse substances. So, you know, that's a fact. It's a couple years old, but I still think it's important to keep in mind that girls and young women who experience some type of sexual abuse in their past are more likely to misuse substances. IPV survivors have nearly double the risk for developing depressive symptoms and 3 times the risk for developing major depressive disorders. Again, you know, these are things that are important to keep in mind when you're working with people. And substance abuse has been found to co-occur in 40 to 60% of IPV incidents across various studies. So just as I was saying before, that last category on the indirect health conditions slide, that substance use and IPV are extremely connected. We see it in many of the cases that we work with. And as this one study was showing, 40 to 60% of victims of IPV also experience substance use disorders at some point in their life. So as Ashley mentioned, she sits on the Maternal Mortality Review Committee. Sorry, I'm trying to move my slides here and they're not. There we go. So she's the Maternal Mortality Review Committee, and the Connecticut Surgeon General had a call to action, which is basically the Maternal Mortality Review Committee looks and reviews at all of the pregnancy related deaths. in the state. So the Surgeon General's call to action is basically an awareness that pregnant and postpartum women are at significantly high risk for who pass away, do have a tendency, there can be IPV involved in those cases in the past. So this quote says, women are particularly vulnerable to intimate partner violence starting in or increasing during pregnancy and postpartum. Adverse outcomes include, among other things, a greater likelihood of depression, suicide, and homicide. So we see very high rates of women who are pregnant, whose violence or dynamics in their unhealthy relationship increase significantly when the pregnancy starts. Sometimes their partners maybe exhibit more controlling behaviors because they just want to make sure their partner's doing the right thing while they're pregnant, or maybe it was an unwanted pregnancy and they're continuing with it, or maybe, you know, they're concerned and stressed about having a baby later. So we do see increased levels of abuse when people are pregnant, and then sometimes also postpartum, because, you know, anyone who has children knows that having children under the most ideal, great circumstances is hard, especially having newborns and young children is a challenging time under the best situations. So all of that stress and all of those triggers can lead to significantly greater parts of an unhealthy dynamic, whether that's physical abuse, the emotional or psychological, or any of it. You know, people tend to think of the physical side again, but it encompasses all of that. All of those abusive behaviors can increase before and during, or excuse me, during and after pregnancy. And the Maternal Mortality Review Committee, you know, does sort of look at all of the factors in these deaths. And a lot of the adverse outcomes include a greater likelihood of depression, suicide, and homicide in those cases. So I just wanted to point that out. Again, talking a little bit about the pregnancy is pregnancy and IPV. Because we see increased abusive and controlling tactics during that period, we obviously also see more adverse outcomes. So we see increased incidence of low birth weight babies and preterm babies and miscarriages, especially in relationships where there's physical violence. We do see a lot of instances of miscarriages. And women who disclose being physically abused were 3 times more likely to experience an STI. And that could be because of sexually abusive tactics that they're being exposed to. As Ashley was saying, you know, someone not wanting to use a form of birth control, all of those things. And women who are controlling or threatening or have a controlling or threatening partner are 5 times more likely to experience persistent symptoms of postpartum maternal depression. And that was sort of what I was touching on that other side, talking about the adverse outcomes, is if someone who has a controlling or threatening partner are significantly more likely to experience postpartum depression as an adverse outcome. And then also women who, 42% of women who experience some form of domestic violence could not stop smoking during pregnancy compared to 15% of non-abused women. I think this is an interesting fact just to point out that in general, you know, looking at those numbers, you know, there's many women who, because of the dynamics in their unhealthy relationship, aren't able to stop unhealthy, you know, physical behaviors themselves during pregnancy, even if they want to, just because of the stress of the relationship. So just a few things to keep in mind around pregnancy. And again, women who experience abuse around the time of pregnancy are more likely to smoke tobacco, as that statistic I read just shared. They're more likely to drink. They're more likely to use drugs. They experience depression, higher rates of stress, and low self-esteem. They attempt suicide and receive less emotional support from their partners. Now, this is from, you know, a variety of studies, but again, it sort of lends itself to the idea of what a significant impact intimate partner violence can play on a person's health, especially a pregnant woman or a birthing person. All of these habits, all of these behaviors that someone is unable to stop during pregnancy, and then they also experience, higher rates of the depression, things like that. So again, just special circumstances to keep in mind if you're working with a pregnant woman or birthing person as a client who might be experiencing intimate partner violence. These are things that are more likely to occur, and just to kind of keep in the back of your mind as sort of special circumstances when it comes to a pregnant woman or birthing person who is in an unhealthy relationship. So next, we're going to talk about the Connecticut resources and what we have here. So CCADV, which is where Jasmine, Ashley, and myself work. We are the overseeing agency, Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We're the overseeing agency for the entire state of Connecticut. Sorry. So we have 18 member organizations across our state, as you can see on this map. I know it's really small and you might not be able to see them, and we will be sharing the slides so you can look and find your town and see which agency covers your area. But we have 18 agencies across the state, so every town is covered. So what these agencies provide is the list that you see here. Every single one of these agencies provides counseling. We provide support groups, emergency shelter or safe houses. We provide court advocacy, safety planning, lethality assessments, which is the lethality assessment program is the program that we have in the state of Connecticut with every single police department across the state. And what that is if police officers are called to a home for an incident of domestic violence, they have a list of 11 questions that they ask the person who they deem to be the victim in this incident. So they review these questions and the questionnaire is then scored. There's a couple of questions that automatically trigger a quote red flag. Some of that is the stalking and the strangulation. And then there's also a few other questions that if a victim quote unquote scores high enough, we deem them more at high risk. It's a more of a red flag case. And not necessarily that case is treated any differently, but we want to make sure that we communicate with the victim, especially in like a stalking or strangulation case, that they are at more high risk for something, potentially lethal to occur. So that program, what that does is once the questionnaire is completed by the police department, then that victim is automatically connected with an advocate to talk on the phone, and the advocate can talk them through what the next steps would be. I was speaking with a survivor recently, and she had been with someone for many years, and it was a woman. She was with a male partner, and he was extremely controlling. She didn't have her own phone, didn't have her own computer. She didn't work. She didn't have her own money. He never let her leave the house without him. So all of these things that we see frequently with under that sort of, the controlling methods that Ashley was talking about earlier, she had no idea that there were all of these services out there. So she ended up, he was physically abusive to her one night, and she ended up calling the police, and the police did this assessment with her and connected her with an advocate who connected her with the court advocacy, all of these things. And she said she had no idea that any of these services were out there for her. She had no idea that there was all this help, and that was one of the reasons she never left. So again, the lethality assessment program connects people right away with services because they may or may not know that those services exist. So again, all of these agencies do the same thing. They provide education trainings, information referrals, and every client is connected to an advocate. So one of the things that we have in Connecticut is CT Safe Connect. A few years ago, each of those 18 agencies had their own hotline that people could call. And just shortly before COVID, all of those hotlines were combined into one statewide hotline called CT Safe Connect. A couple of our member orgs still do have their own local hotline phone number, but in general, we recommend that victims or someone who works with someone who's experienced IPV that might not be comfortable calling themselves, can call CT Safe Connect on someone's behalf, or speak with an advocate. So CT Safe Connect is housed physically in our Glastonbury office, and we have advocates there 24/7 to answer phone calls, texts, chats, emails. We also have a video conferencing system for anyone who needs ASL. We use Language Line. All of our advocates speak more than one language, but if someone calls and needs access to a language that no one there who is working at that time speak, we use Language Line. So we recommend that anyone who has any questions about whether or not, you know, like that person on my local chat room that wasn't sure if what her husband's behavior is exhibiting is really abusive, that would be a perfect case for her to call CT Safe Connect and walk through that with an advocate and, you know, talk to them about that and say, you know, I don't know what to do. What should I do? And those advocates will then connect that caller to the local member organization in the town where they're currently residing and make sure they get connected to resources. You know, this is where people will call to also get connected to resources for our shelter, our safe houses, and then, as Jasmine is going to talk about later, our rapid rehousing program. This is really where we suggest everyone calls first to touch base. We recommend for medical providers, community providers, if you ever have a question about some behaviors that, you know, client is sharing is in their relationship and you want to know if it's considered unhealthy or not, you can call. We recommend physicians call. And we do sort of recommend too that we have people call all the time who say, I'm not calling about a specific case. I just, you know, I heard about your resource and I want to call. I want to see what it's like to call. So when I suggest that a client or a patient call you, I can say that I've called and here's what it's like. Here's what it's like to talk to someone. I have sat in at CT Safe Connect and sort of monitored and observed the calls and on their end, and our advocates are amazing, and the work that they do with everyone is really incredible and notable. And it's really great to hear how they can help someone navigate the system the right way and make sure they get connected to the resources that they need. So I know I'm sort of running short on time, so I will include this in the slide deck just so you have some information on the kind of numbers that we're talking about as an organization, how many people CCADV serves. So, so these are our fiscal year numbers for 2021, and we service almost 39,000 victims in the state of Connecticut. And this sort of breaks down, you know, how many victims use the court-based advocacy program, how many use our safe houses, how many children we served. So the numbers I really just wanted to point out was that almost 39,000 clients that we served. And then also because of COVID, but also still now that we're coming out of COVID, our safe houses, our shelters are still functioning at over 150% capacity. You know, we really do try to make sure that as a component of safety planning, you know, every client is walked through what's best for them, but for those who need shelter, we absolutely do provide them shelter. We also do have, you know, some resources for hoteling clients if there's not space and it's not safe for them to be at home. So, you know, this just kind of goes through the number you can take a look at later just to give you a context for the number of people that we serve. So I know Ashley asked earlier if in the capacity of what you do, if anyone screens for domestic violence or does any of that work. I didn't see anything in the chat really or anyone speak up, but you know, it's not even so much about screening for IPV, but what is something that each of you can do every time to help someone who might be experiencing intimate partner violence. And at the end of the day, part of that component is screening, is asking questions, is asking the right questions and connecting with those that you work with to make sure that you are a safe person for them to talk to and maybe share something that's going on in their life that they might not be comfortable sharing with anyone else. So what we've learned generally from research about screening clients, asking them questions, is that in general, people, you know, don't necessarily are offended by being asked these questions, especially if they're not in an unhealthy relationship. It's kind of like I talk about when you go to the doctors, and we advocate largely for physicians to screen for IPV. Ashley and I work a lot with OBGYN offices, and so we advocate for them to screen consistently with all of their clients to make sure their relationships are healthy. And in general, like when you go to a physician's office, you know, many times you're asked if you drink or if you smoke, right? Almost everybody is asked that when you go in for any kind of checkup. And we want, our goal someday is for, if a physician asks you about, is your relationship healthy? Is, you know, someone putting their hands on you? Do you feel safe? We want those questions at some point to be just as benign and as expected to be asked as if you drink and smoke. That's sort of our ultimate goal, because the reality is that patients, clients, people fall through the cracks when we don't ask. If we don't give someone the opportunity to share what's going on, they're never going to do so. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but the reality is, for the most part, many clients may or may not disclose that something unhealthy is going on, but just knowing that someone is there to listen, that someone's giving them the opportunity to do so is very important, just so they know at some point, maybe if, you know, they come into a physician's office and they're asked these questions and they say, no, 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 no. But then if they go back, let's say a year later for a checkup, and they're asked these questions again, and maybe the behaviors have gotten worse and they're starting to get scared and they're nervous, maybe next time they know you're going to ask and they're going to say yes. So at the end of the day, you know, we've realized that people necessarily aren't upset or offended by being asked these questions, and it's important to ask these questions just to make sure we are giving people the opportunity to share if they need someone to talk to. So,
Devon, I'm
yes.
sorry. There is a question in the chat. Are there services for men that are victims of domestic violence?
Absolutely. We do provide services for men who are victims. Approximately 20% of our clients are male and identify as male. So we absolutely do serve male clients as well. Great question. Thank you for asking that. I appreciate it. So CCADV, we recommend, and we use a national resource that was developed by Futures Without Violence, which is sort of a national domestic violence agency. And they have a system for screening called CUES, C-U-E-S, which stands for confidentiality, universal education, empowerment, and support. And no matter if you screen for IPV or not, it may be important to sort of establish a policy about, you know, including sort of this CUES model and education for every client. You know, as Ashley, I think, was saying earlier, and as it says on this slide, like, everyone is either in a relationship or knows someone who's in a relationship. And we just want to make sure that if you're someone who's in an unhealthy relationship or know someone who's in an unhealthy relationship, that you know that there's resources out there for you. So what is CUES? So the C in CUES stands for confidentiality. And what we mean by that is, if you're working with a client, you know, even if they're there with someone or a support person or with a partner, if you're going to ask them questions about the relationship that should, you know, that are personal questions, they really should be asked alone. So we recommend, if you're going to ask screening type questions for intimate partner violence, that you ask them with alone, or, you know, during the intake process, things like that. And it's also important to remind people that intimate partner violence is not a mandatory reporting opportunity in the state of Connecticut in general. It's not something that needs to be reported to the police, other than on the two exceptions of if there's a child involved, or if it's falls under the category of sort of like elder abuse. But in general, if you have a client saying that they're in a relationship and their partner is being physically abusive, that's not a mandatory reporting opportunity according to the state of Connecticut. So that's important to keep in mind, so that you are aware of that, and that you can stress to your clients and say, you know, that it, you know, you're a mandated reporter, and that you're mandated to report child abuse or elder abuse, or if they're going to harm themselves or others. But in general, that you are not mandated to report something that they're sharing with you about their relationship. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. One of the things with this is, even if you're not going through a technical screening process, which really you'll see in a minute with this CUES, really only is 5 questions. It's 5 questions. It does not take very long to ask. But even if you aren't asking those specific 5 questions, we really are trying to promote the idea of universal education. Universal education every time that there simply are these resources in the state of Connecticut. And you can, say things like, we've started asking everyone about, the health and safety of a relationship because domestic violence is a public health crisis. And we just want to make sure we're asking everyone and sharing resources with everyone. And again, people aren't necessarily offended by that. They don't feel like they have to, share anything with you. But again, giving people the opportunity to disclose something if they feel unsafe, but also giving people the knowledge and the power that there are resources out there, like the survivor I mentioned earlier in the training who, was in a very controlling relationship and had no idea until the police showed up at her house and started asking her questions that there were resources out there to help her. She had known, who knows? I don't know whether things would have been different, but just knowing that there's resources that are out there, and you never know who you might impact by that. In the work that Ashley and I do, working with physicians frequently, we say, just sharing with every patient every time that there's resources. It might not be something that patient needs, but they might know someone who needs this. It might be their brother, a friend, a sister, a cousin, whatever. You never know who might need that information at some point in their life. I did a training a few months ago. It was like a teen dating violence training. And I share this story frequently just to give a sense of how connected we all are and why this idea of universal education is so important. So a local high school was doing Little Shop of Horrors as their spring musical. And the director was amazing. And she said, because there's some themes of intimate partner violence, domestic violence in this show, I'd really like you to come in and just kind of talk to the kids about teen dating violence and what's safe and what's not safe. And so I thought it was an amazing idea. I went and did a presentation to the kids about teen dating violence and safety, just because there was physical violence in the show. And you want to make sure that you're not triggering someone, especially a young high school kid. So kind of coming in and setting the precedent and being a little preemptive with some education was an awesome idea. And the director of the show was great. But so I did this whole presentation. I had some resources there for the kids and they were great. They were awesome. And at the end of the show, a 15-year-old boy came up to me and he asked if he could take, one of my pamphlets or one of my cards with our CT Safe Connect number. And he sort of said, he said, I'm taking this, he said, because I'm really worried about my mom's best friend. He's like, I've known her my whole life. And she comes over all the time crying about her husband. And, I hear her talking to my mom about, he hits her and he does this and all of these things. And he said, I just want to give this to my mom to give to her so she knows that there's help out there if she needs it. So, at the end of the day, this is a presentation for, high school kids. But in that moment, there was a connection made so that maybe his mom's friend, and who knows, it could have been for his mom. I don't know. It could be for his mom's friend, who knows. But at the end of the day, he was given education and empowerment to give to someone else who he thought might be in need. So again, this is why we're such strong advocates for giving education every time. And that's sort of what this E stands for, is the empowerment piece, just making sure we share this information because we never know who needs it and who it might benefit and who might help. And just as I was talking about, we would love for questions about intimate partner violence to be just as standard in intakes at physicians' offices, things like that, in community providers asking questions about this. We want those resources, that you see in the bathrooms and the tear-offs, just to be a normal part of everywhere that you'll see, to make sure that someone who needs it can access that information. So this is sort of a sample script that we provide or suggest for people. Like I said, even if you don't want to ask like the 5 specific questions, even if you just want to bring up a conversation about healthy relationships or not healthy relationships, this is just sort of a way to bring that up in your dynamic with the clients that you're working with, kind of talking to everyone about the impact of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, because it is a public health crisis, because it has serious impacts on overall mental health, physical health, children's health. We just want to let you know there's this hotline, there's people here who you can help. Obviously, you can make it your own thing. You don't have to read this specific script, but it's a way to sort of bring up the conversation and engage the conversation with your clients to say, there are resources for this available here in the state if you need it. And again, as I said earlier, disclosure is not necessarily the goal, but disclosures do happen. It's not necessarily the goal when you're asking these questions to have someone just pour their heart out and give you their life story, because it doesn't happen very often. But when it does happen, we also want to empower providers to make sure that they are empowered and knowledgeable as to what to do to help support their clients and what the next steps are and what to do if someone does disclose that they're feeling unsafe or an unhealthy relationship. So basically the final S is the support. And at the end of the day, that's what we hope all of you provide to your clients, is that support piece. Meaning if someone shares with you something, you know, that you let them know that help is available and here's the resource. And then also, you know, a warm handoff, making sure that if you can, maybe, you know, let them use your office to make that phone call to CT Safe Connect if they don't feel comfortable doing it from their phone, or, you know, making sure, help them make that phone call, whatever it is that you feel like based on your relationship with that client that you have to do to make sure they get a warm handoff to the support services that they might need. And again, we consider, you know, everyone to be a part of this safety net to help clients make sure that they get their resources, that we don't, this is a lot of information that we've just thrown at you. And then Jasmine's coming in to give you a lot of amazing information about housing as well. So I know it's a lot. And that's why I'm also glad we're sharing the slides with you all later. So you have them, so you have the information, because it is a lot of information. It's a lot of heavy information. I've done a lot of talking in the past hour, but we certainly don't expect you to become, you know, experts in intimate partner violence. This is why we have CT Safe Connect. This is why we have our advocates there, our advocates at all of our agencies. We do expect them to be the experts and work with clients, but as long as everyone who's in the community providers, physicians, things like that, have some awareness of red flags and things that they can do to help support their clients and make these warm handoffs and connections is what we're trying to advocate for. So just real quick, because I think I'm winding down here, our advocates, as I said, we do expect them to be the experts and work with clients to make sure they get connected to services. So we have our advocates that work at Safe Connect, and then we have our advocates that work at the agencies, and they're the ones that are going to be there to answer the questions, to do the safety planning, to kind of look at scenarios and walk clients through the scenarios, help determine in that safety plan that Jasmine's going to talk about later, you know, do they need shelter services? Should they go back to their home? Should they not? And then they're the ones that sort of connect them with the housing program, with the legal advocacy, support groups, and then also referrals to other amazing programs like all of yours for help with maybe substance use or mental health, all of those things. That's the role of our advocates, is to make those referrals and those resources. So at the end of the day, as a part of this safety net, what can you do to help victims and survivors? And it's really just all about listening and supporting them and making sure you're giving them a safe space to feel heard if they do want to share this information with you. And again, not expecting people to disclose all of this, but if they do, making sure they get connected to the right resources that they need, especially those clients who are sharing that they feel very isolated, those ones who feel like they're not allowed to leave the house unattended, or they don't have a phone, or they don't have resources. You know, isolation is a critical component of this, and that's why we saw such high numbers of IPV during COVID, because people felt really isolated and really alone because they were stuck in a home with someone who was you know, harming them in some way. So that's why we really did see that spike in numbers during COVID. And we also just want to remind clients that anyone, you know, if you recommend they call CT Safe Connect, just so you all know, they don't have to give us their name. And then if they do, you know, our services are not connected to DCF or ICE or anything like that. So there's no connection with that. So they should and hopefully do feel safe calling us, even if they don't feel, you know, safe, if their immigration status, you know, isn't, if they're concerned about that, those sort of things. You know, they certainly don't have to give us their name, but we're more than happy to help them and provide resources and make connections for them. And they don't even have to tell us who they are. And we just want to make sure that they get connected to the help that they need. And I just want to end by saying, you know, success is measured by your efforts to help reduce isolation and improve options for safety. So that's really the goal at the end of the day, is just to make sure that we're helping clients, you know, not feel so alone and getting connected to the support that they need. So that is the end of my portion of the presentation. Does anyone have any questions? If you just want to unmute, because I'm sharing, so I really can't see everybody. If anyone has any questions right now before Jasmine talks about housing, I'd love to answer them.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I feel like crap.
Okay.
You haven't mentioned anything about the domestic violence as far as it pertains to men, because men are also victims of domestic violence.
Right, absolutely. Now, someone was asking that question earlier, if we do provide services to men, and we absolutely do. Our client, 20% of our clients are men. And that's why, you know, in most of my presentation, I try to refer to people as clients rather than women. Sometimes we do inadvertently use the term women because majority of victims are women, but that does not discount anyone who is non-binary or who identifies as male. Our services all still stand and we provide the same services to male clients as well, and they're approximately 20% of our population.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question, or?
Somewhat.
Okay, I'm happy to share. I don't know if you have a more specific question. All of the services that our member orgs provide, the list that I gave with the legal advocacy, the counseling, the safe houses, all of those things still stand true for our male clients as well. We are not a female-only organization. We do not provide services for those individuals who perpetrate violence. That's not the role of our organization. We do not provide those services. We only provide victim services.
Okay. So if a male comes in that has been victimized, y'all will support him?
Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely.
Is that also with housing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. So now the last 25, 30 minutes, I'm gonna hand it over to Jasmine. Jasmine, I'll do your slides if you want, but I will give you the floor to talk about housing.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? We're good?
You sound a little far away. I don't know.
Let me see. I want to make sure. Is that better?
That's better. If you can turn up the volume maybe a little bit. I don't know.
Just let me know everyone can hear me. All right. So I am Jasmine. I oversee the rapid rehousing program for the state for all member programs. So with my slides, you'll hear me say really like overall advocates. So we do not just work with domestic violence, just IPV. We also work with sexual assault and human trafficking when we talk about housing. So that is just for anyone who knows housing or works with your CANs in any form. My program really works with anyone who falls under category 4. So that's those 4 things. So aside from just our 18 programs, I also have a contract to work with Siri. So working with immigration services and again, the human trafficking, labor trafficking, really anything you can think of. So that's where my services kind of fall. It's a larger scale of victims. So overall, just for this part, we'll talk about kind of housing needs, housing advocacy, resources, and how to access, and then a little bit about the rapid rehousing program itself. So overall, over 50% of homeless women report domestic violence as their cause to homelessness. So for us, when it came to building this rapid rehousing program, these were really the statistics we were looking at. Kind of what is causing homelessness overall. So to know that domestic violence was a very high cause of that, we wanted to know how we could help our victims. And so victims being anyone who is in need that fits category 4. Overall, in many of our cases, financial abuse is huge, as what Devon and Ashley both talked about.
And that can look different for anyone coming into this program or that's in need. So for example, just thinking of housing, we've had clients that make over $100,000, and people would normally say like, there's no way they're eligible for a program or for services because they make so much money. But we have those cases where the victim at the time has no access to their own money. So of course they will be eligible. So that financial abuse it comes up very often when we talk about housing needs and kind of, sheltering and just overall basic needs. One thing with survivors and why it makes it really unique is survivors do have kind of limited locations and limited housing options that they can access. And the reason for that can be around confidentiality and overall just safety. Low levels of literal homelessness, but very high on housing instability. So when we talk about not being literally homeless, so not living literally on the street, but then talking about that safety, it could be we have a family that's living with friends or kind of moving around between friends and family members. What comes up in those situations is now we are putting the friends and the family members at risk if the abuser knows the family members and the friends. So that's kind of where we go into the sheltering if needed. Another unique thing with our survivors, and this was mentioned earlier as well, is possibly bad credit scores. If the abuser is kind of putting credit cards in their names or taking out loans in their names. I would say, as in my bio, I work in shelter. And the one thing I would always do with anyone that comes in, it's, I know you want housing, I know you want to start looking for a job, you want this, have you looked at your credit report? So I have Credit Karma on my phone. I've always suggested all of the people I work with, all of my victims to download it. And it's very surprising how many things are on their credit report that they had no idea even existed. So now a lot of our work in that beginning stages is now how do we clean this up? Because for the purpose of housing stability, credit is a huge part of that. So those are things that we really do come across in regards to just housing needs with our survivors. The next slide, though. So responding to these needs. So really, we want to have those targeting conversations. So what are we going to do with safety? What other options might meet the family's needs when it comes to housing or what their needs are overall? One thing with our program, we are housing first. So you don't need income. You don't need to have documents. We really want to focus on what is going to put you safe at this time. One thing that we truly believe within this program is housing is a DV prevention. So that is something that I strongly agree with. I believe if we could take the financial burden off of some families, that maybe DV will go down. We know stress causes anger. So if we're able to help in any financial way, that the DV this would really be like a DV prevention program. So that's just the start of our prevention work. Other things around housing. So yes, I do oversee the rapid rehousing program for the DV programs, but I also do help in kind of just that overall advocacy with transitional programs, permanent supportive housing, vouchers, and then also if clients or advocates need help, which is understanding VAWA. This is for landlords as well. Understanding the VAWA laws and how things work or what's allowed and not allowed. That's pretty much where my role is, and I'm welcome if you ever want a training just around that. We can definitely have that conversation as well. And one thing that we also consider is really just their current situation and any other housing barriers. So criminal history and substance use are up there in their barriers. I saw a question. So VAWA, so the Violence Against Women Act. So it's a federal law basically that there's different sections of it, but for the housing part, it's, for example, like if a client needs to leave their apartment early due to domestic violence. Basically, a landlord cannot hold that against them or try to evict them due to domestic violence. It just covers their safety. Also, if you're working within like a project-based or scatter site PSH, and let's say violence happens in one unit and that client's no longer safe, VAWA will allow the transfer of a voucher to move to another unit if it's available. Or the housing authorities could work together and try to move that client within another housing authority, again, if it's available. If not, they will be put on a list. So again, there's a lot more to VAWA, but just for the purpose of housing, that's really what we work around. All right. So housing resources for victims. Go ahead, Devin. So as Devin showed you on the maps, we have our 18 member organizations. Again, talking about housing, SERI is our number 19, and they are located in Bridgeport, Connecticut, but SERI oversees the whole state. So they're just another statewide program, and they are our partner in regards of housing advocacy. So working with any of those 19 sites, there's things that we can really help with. So safety in place, that is how do we safety plan and keep our victims in their home with family and friends, and how do we keep them safe? And that could be working with the courts and getting restraining orders. It can be working on just overall confidentiality or getting them cameras in the home or alarm systems, really whatever it is that they feel is going to help them be safe. And then that kind of goes into that shelter diversion. So maybe instead of coming into shelter, there's other things that we can do to help you feel safe. Now, we know we cannot keep everyone safe in the community. That is, of course, our goal, is to keep people safe. But there are those cases where shelter is needed. So just the same way Devin showed that phone number, you will call CT Safe Connect, and they would do an intake. So I would say for all of you, if you are working with a client, we do ask that the client is the one that's calling. You can definitely be there as a support and be on the phone as long as we have a verbal consent from the client. But sometimes they might just need support. So it's very important that when you do call, it is an intake process. There's multiple questions, just to kind of figure out the situation. From Safe Connect, that information is sent to the local program in that catchment. And the catchment will then call, you as provider and the client back and kind of just really talk more about that safety in regards to where are they safe? So one of the questions that I always ask before bringing a client into shelter is, where do you work? Where's your abuser work? Where are your family and friends? Like, where would you feel safe? For many, that can mean they might live in Bridgeport, but they're put into a shelter in Sharon, Connecticut. If that's what's safe is for them, then that's what we would do. We would call around the state and look for shelter space. And I know this comes up. So again, victim, this is for men as well, or any gender. So we do have shelter space. I will say it sometimes becomes harder if it's like a shared room. We wouldn't share a room for a male victim and a female victim just for their own traumas. But in those cases, if we do not have space, there is limited hoteling money, and that's something that we would work with case by case if we cannot find shelter, especially if they're in imminent danger. So more so than just shelter, we have one-time assistance. Sometimes we have clients that really only need security deposit, and they have income, they're willing to move, they might need help looking for an apartment, but they just need a security deposit to get them into their own place where they feel safe. So that is something that we can help with. Along with just security deposit, maybe they need help with just rental assistance. So that is the program that I oversee, and I will talk a little bit more about that. Within our DV programs, we do have transitional homes. So they're about 2 years where the family could stay there and be safe. And I know the question is always, so how do we refer people to those programs? For any of these programs, and again, if you're working with someone who just needs housing assistance, just calling Safe Connect. Safe Connect will connect them with the local member, and the local member would get them on the list. And I'll show you a little bit how that's done in a bit. Any permanent supportive housing, it's really just working with that list that I'm going to show you. And then just referrals overall with their local CAN. So it's very important, again, if you're working with someone, the sooner the better if they are needed any of these resources. I will say eligibility and like what's available is going to change by the region and by the CAN that you're working with or the programs that you're working with. So just something to keep in mind. So a little bit about just understanding safety planning. So really as an advocate, our goal is to keep our victims safe. So this can be short-term or long-term goals. So short-term could be, you know, tonight I'm gonna go stay with my mom because I feel safe to be there tonight. But long-term could be, okay, I really want my own apartment, or I really need to get my birth certificate and my social, you know, whatever it is for that client at that moment. And we really want to focus on whatever the plan is, it's client driven. So it's not up to me or Devon as an advocate to say, we think this is what you should do. It's what do you think you want to do? What is going to keep you safe? So really safety planning is up to the client. So yep, client driven. And sometimes for a lot of us, it's hard to understand. Sometimes staying with the abuser is the safest thing to do. And if that's the case, then let's safety plan around that. And I know for many of us, it's hard to kind of wrap our head around that. But at times, because of the death rates of leaving, that maybe waiting, maybe you know next month your abuser is going on a work trip. So they'll be out of the state. So let's keep you safe for that month in your home. Here's the number. Make sure you have, you know, a safe word where you text to your mom, or, you know, you have an extra phone charge that they don't know about, where you can text 911 if needed. So you really kind of think outside the box on what can we do in that moment until we can plan for a safe exit. Okay, so really looking at safe housing. So we look at anyone who is currently fleeing. So that's that category 4. So category 4, you have to be currently fleeing, and it could be domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, anything that's going to be harmful to the victim from another person. In regards to the shelter, we really want to look at those who are in imminent danger. So if we cannot do diversion, or we cannot find any other like resources at that moment, and shelter is the best option, then that is what we would do for that client at that moment. One thing I will say when it comes to shelter, we do hear a lot like, we called and they didn't get in, or the program doesn't work. We hear that often. So really when we hear that, it's just maybe we need to have another conversation. Maybe there was a misunderstanding somewhere between like the intake. So let's just talk. Or it could be there really was no shelter and we were able to keep that person safe for the night, and we can work on finding shelter the next day. So just so you can kind of understand a little bit about our shelter system and like our capacity. For example, one of our programs has 30 beds. So that's including children and adults. So if we have a family, and I would say being at shelter, if I've taken in a family of 7, our rooms wouldn't hold 7. So we would have to split up one family that's going to now take up 2 rooms. So 2 rooms that would have been open for another family is now just with one family. So thinking about it like that, and that's why I think having these housing resources are so great, because the goal is to, 1, not have people in shelter, and also getting them out of shelter as quick as possible and into a safe apartment of their own. overall, Connecticut has about 2,000 beds. So that's just with all of our programs, working with the CAN system, if we can get shelter elsewhere. So we really, really want, to focus on those who are in imminent danger at that time throughout Connecticut. And I will say our shelters are normally at capacity majority of the time. So housing is a huge part, is just getting people out of their shelter and into their own apartment. One thing I do want to add about just the safe houses, we do say like IPV a lot, so intimate partner violence, but I do want to add that there are some programs that do take family violence. It really just comes on the capacity and the catchment. That's really what we look at. So for example, one of our programs in Hartford, they only take IPV, but that's because Greater Hartford is such a large catchment. They have to really focus on kind of one population. But you might have another program that's a little bit smaller where they have the availability, where they can take, family violence or roommate violence. So I would just say, if you are working with anyone, any type of violence, like just call and we will do our part and kind of see what we can do to keep them safe. So just some suggestions when working with clients, really just the language on how we're speaking to them. So, not victim blaming, but really being there as a support and trying to be trauma informed. Understanding that the choice that the victim makes is their best choice because they know their partner and they know kind of, the best thing to do in that moment. So those are kind of some helpful tips when you're working with someone. If you're not comfortable doing any of that or even having that conversation, again, that is why Safe Connect is here. That can help with that, kind of go with those conversations and ask questions appropriately. So just give us a call and we are happy to help and kind of guide the situation. So what does housing advocacy look like? I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. Overall, kind of housing advocacy, it's whatever the client needs. And that's like pretty much the easiest way to put it. So if, again, they need security deposit, we can help with that. If they just need safety planning, we can help with that. Getting them involved in other programs. If they're looking for something long-term, or maybe they need help with disability application, that's when we're able to kind of work with them and do case management with. Working on getting them on the list for like Section 8. If that's what the need is, then that's something that we would work on. Again, understanding that VAWA and like their own rights, tenant rights, helping landlords understand landlord rights. So whatever it is around housing, that is what we can assist with. So at each of our agencies, there is one point of contact, one or two point of contact for who is their housing advocate. So that's kind of the one person that knows all the answers. And if they don't know all the answers, they will call me. And if I don't know the answers, I call Cutter DOH and I find out the answers. So really what housing advocacy is what's going to be best for the client. And then of course, what is that long-term stability and how are they going to really access and, things that they need or income and employment. So overall case management. And then aside from that, just kind of touch base on other parts of advocacy, getting SNAP, if they need WIC, if they want to go back to school, maybe they just need help paying for a certificate. So whatever it is going to help with long-term stability. And then of course, with our victims, while we're working with them with housing, if we can get them connected to something long-term, like a voucher of some sort, that's always going to be our goal if that's what the need is. I will say vouchers are very limited. If you are working with someone and they say they're on a wait list for Section 8, we do know those lists can take a few years. They are starting to move, but if you do come across that, just remind them to just make sure their information is up to date, making sure that their phone number is up to date, their address is up to date, because it's really on a response time. So kind of once you don't respond, you kind of lose your spot. So if you are working with someone that does bring that up, just kind of remind them of that information. And you can always call that housing authority and get updates on where you are on the list. All right, so how to access. So really just calling Safe Connect for these programs. And if the client does not want to call Safe Connect or they're not DV and you're working with a client, they can call 211 and they will have access to the same programs just through different agencies. So this is just a quick map of the CAN. So that's just the overall, like when you call 211 based on where you live, this is where they will connect you. So one of these can, so Fairfield County, Greater New Haven, Greater Hartford can. So again, you'll have these slides. So whichever area you're in, you'll kind of know when you call 211 or Safe Connect where you'll be connected to. So we wanted to keep this in here just to kind of show you on our end what we do. So as you can see, if someone calls for housing needs and they call 211, there's multiple steps they have to go through. So you call 201, you do an assessment, they figure out if you get shelter or not shelter, you go on a list, and then they kind of figure out if they can give you rapid exit. Some people self-resolve, meaning that they self-pay, and then they get matched at their housing solution meeting. With our program, because our program is confidential, our clients can choose not to call 211, not to be put on a public list with their name on there. They can go through us and they will be put on that same list without doing an assessment, without talking about shelter and trying to divert them, without calling 211. They will come directly to us and get put on that list automatically with an anonymous code. And that code allows them to have access to the same and all of the housing options as anyone who called 211. Oh, go ahead, Devin. Next slide. Yeah. So a little bit just about rapid rehousing. So really quickly, it's if you have to be fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking, our goal is to get people housed within 30 days or less. We do know right now in Connecticut, we are probably one of the lowest rates of vacancies for units. So it is pretty difficult, but that will always continue to be our goal. Our advocates work with housing specialists who have great relationships with landlords to continue working with all, the advocate and the client and the landlord to get people housed as quickly and as safely as possible. And as mentioned before, we are a housing first intervention, meaning our goal is to connect people to the units, and then we do the case management and figure out kind of all their other needs after that. It's great if they can avoid shelter, but we also want to keep them safe. So shelter is needed first, then we would do that first and then work on housing after. So just overall core components. So housing location is 30 days. We are kind of flexible with assistance. So our program can go 2 months, it can go 4 months, it can go 23 months. So it really comes down to what the client needs and kind of what their income is. And all that is discussed with their case manager while in our rapid rehousing program. So this is a little bit about that category 4, which we talked about. So they just have to be attempting to flee. For this is for the eligibility. There's no income requirement, so there's no minimum, there's no maximum like that. The example I gave earlier, we've had clients that make over $100,000. They can still be a part of rapid rehousing for the time frame that they need. They do not have to be documented. So if you're working with someone who's undocumented, normally that's a fear of working with landlords. We do have landlords that do not ask for documentation. Probably not as many, but we do have some. So we can definitely do the work and help look. And then one thing about our program is the household really creates their own. Meaning if they have a best friend they want to live with, or they want grandma to live with them, or an uncle because the uncle works from home and can watch the kids, for our program, they can create who they want their family to be. So whoever that's going to help them be successful, that's what we want in that house. So that's something that makes our program very unique and different. So whoever it is, again, it can be a best friend and the best friend's child. Maybe the kids are the same age. Maybe one's older that can help babysit so both moms can work. Whatever it is that they need, they can create their own. It doesn't have to be a blood relationship. It doesn't have to be, you know, a mom. It's whatever they want and what they need at that time. So something else that's very, very unique about our program and also very exciting is, so we have rapid rehousing in place. So rapid rehousing in place, it means that the family's already in the home. Maybe the police got involved because of a restraining order or a protective order, and now the person who's causing abuse must leave the home. But maybe the person that's causing abuse was the one that was paying the rent, and now the family's there and they can't afford it. We can come in and help take over that rent. The only thing that we need is an inspection. The apartment must be rent reasonable. So meaning that it has to match the same rent as the apartments that are nearby. And then just a lease without the person who's causing abuse's name on it. And we're able to help while they stay in their place. So if we don't have to move a family to another school district, to another apartment, maybe there's kids and that's the only home they know, then that's what we want to do, is to keep them as safe as possible, as well as keep them, you know, to their norm, especially when there's children involved. So that's something very exciting and very different about our program. So if that's something that comes up, if you're working with someone who's struggling with just affording rent because the abuser or person causing abuse is no longer there, please have them reach out to Safe Connect. And then overall, I just want to look at one thing. Oh yeah, so is there any